All right, guys. I had a little audio problem, so hopefully you guys can hear me. If someone can let me know if you can hear me, that'd be great. I'd like to welcome you guys to another show of. We're gonna pick up where we left off the other day on dating, and some of you guys are now just entering into the dating world, and you're wondering where do I go from now or here, and so, if you guys missed the last episode, I just encourage all of you guys to go back and watch that so that you guys can catch up. If this is your first time, I want to thank you for jumping on and spending your time with me. You don't have to, you chose to, and that for me is important. So, I just figured we'd go ahead and get started today and pick up where we left off. So, I think the first thing is coming into the understanding that make sure that if we're going to first start out with having the idea of dating and then being attracted to someone and then forcing yourself to be attracted to that person, you might say, well, why in the world would you say forced to be attracted to a person? Sometimes people jump into relationships, right, on the basis that they like the idea of having a relationship, and then the other side of that is that sometimes people like to be with someone and have a hard time being by themselves, and they can't see themselves being alone or being single. So rather than that, they rather jump into a relationship and may not necessarily even be attracted to that person. They just like the idea that I'm dating, I'm with someone, and for that, I'd rather be with someone than without somebody. And so the other side is also the financial side when people date, because sometimes we all know it's easier to live on two incomes than it is one income. And so sometimes, and you have to understand that there are people who uh, are in a relationship only on the basis of being financially being with someone and not necessarily because they want to be with someone. They like the idea that that person helps them pay the bills, they help them uh, be able to uh, take care of the household expenses. And you might think that's crazy, but if I was talking about the show with Married at First Sight, if you guys go back to some of those shows, you will see that some of these individuals did not and was not attracted physically to the significant other. They were just with them. Um, and so a lot of times we need to realize that make sure that if you are dating someone, that you are in it because you really want to have a potential wife or potential husband down the road, and not on the basis of I just want to feel comfortable and not feel alone and being by myself. So give me just a second, guys. I'm trying to get into my feed here. Mm, okay, well, all right. So make sure, like I said, make sure you have the main reason of wanting to be in that relationship is because you don't want uh, to just be alone. Because at the end of the day, you're going to crush that individual. They are in it because they really are wanting to be in that relationship. And if you drag someone along for your own agenda, for your own purposes, you will shatter that person. and it will take a tremendous amount for them to come back to the next person, and they will question themselves, does this person really want to be with me? Because the last time that I was in it, they were with me only for financial or because they didn't want to be alone. So don't put someone into that situation, and don't put yourself into that situation, because at the end of the day, it is someone's feelings. Is that that person is a human being, and they will have to recover and heal from a process of you not really wanting to be with them. And so, uh, just make sure that you're in it, because you really want to be in it. And it's very important that you guys identify that. So, so the next thing I thought I would talk about is, uh, one thing I see a lot of times when people, uh, we were talking about communication, and we live in a digital world, and I'm blown away on how many people go on dates. And I'm going to bring this picture up for you guys, so you guys can kind of have a visual here. Uh, See this couple here? Look at this guy, right? He's on the phone, right? Probably chit chatting to his buddy. Hey, what time are we going to go and on the golf course tomorrow? And or he's talking to somebody, his buddy. He's on a date. Now, obviously, you see the girl on the left, right? She does not look like she is having a really good time. I mean, she is looking like, man, I could have just stayed home for this, right? Make sure that you understand that this is, when you go on a date, people want your individual attention, right? They want to be on the date. They don't want to hear your phone conversations about your buddy and how the game went, or various different conversations that you may be having on the phone. So don't put yourself into this. Don't go on a date carrying on two conversations when you're supposed to be out there on a date. It's a horrible, 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 uh, uh, bad impression that you don't want to start out on a date in this manner, right? So make sure that you guys uh, spend your time, put away the phone, put your phone on silent, right? And pick up that phone later after you get done on your date, and pick up the conversation from there. But don't do this. Don't do this, because obviously this girl on the left is extremely, extremely upset. All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is very important, and uh, and I'm saying this because one of the things that I see a lot on a lot of support groups, Christian marriage support groups, is this very topic about sex, right? And the reason I want to really emphasize on this is because this is a very important aspect of a relationship, in the sense that there are individuals who uh, see sex as a part that God created for a man, a woman, right, to be intimate with each other, right? And there seems to be uh, a thing that we try to avoid in this conversation, especially probably on dates. You probably think, man, I don't want to talk about this very particular issue on a date, right? But it's very important that you have these conversations because you need to understand that sex is a temporal thing that normally when we go on a date, uh, you should be abstaining from it, number one. Let me make that clear. You should be saving yourself, right, for that day of marriage, right? Sex was not created so that we could propagate with each other just on the basis because we want to and because it feels good. It was something that God designed between a man and a woman. Now, I still believe that this is something you need to talk about in the sense that if we were to get married, right, and had that conversation, right, how important is that to you? And is there any issues, right? Anything that makes you uncomfortable, right? You need to have a real transparent conversation on these very things because some individuals will have had a disastrous, horrible conflict in their life when they were young. Maybe they were molested, maybe they were raped, maybe they were at a point of their life where they don't see sex in the same manner that you do, right? And so having those conversations, and I'm saying this because you want to have those conversations prior of jumping into a marriage, because there are things that individuals can do to work on before they jump into that marriage, right? And they can get healed prior to jumping into that marriage, not being healed in the sense of from molestation or from rape after the fact of you two getting married. This is something that needs to be done prior to you all getting married. And I know for a lot of us, we don't want to talk about the subject, right? Because we feel uncomfortable. But this is a very transparent moment that you need to have at that table, right? And those conversations is how do you perceive how do you look at making love, right? Uh, and and then talk about those real deal moments because you don't want to be having this conversation after you get married and then you guys run into a you butt heads in the bedroom because you're like I don't do that type of thing or I'm not comfortable with that. So when you have these conversations out front and during your courtship and getting to know each other, you can address those issues and you'll be able to go into that marriage with a lot more better understanding than waiting later on and then realize that there are individuals. I mean, I'll say this: there are the reason why I was talking about soul ties because when we don't get healed from soul ties, what will take place is that you may be in bed with that partner or that significant other. Well, I would say your wife, number one. It should be your wife, right? But if you don't break that soul tie, then we are subject in being in a place of having spirits that will rise up in through imagination, right? Imagination of that partner that we used to be with, that partner that we had a relationship with, right? And there are people who are making love in the midst of doing that, and they're not even thinking about their wife or their husband. That soul tie of imagination, that spirit is still tied to them. So as they're making love to their wife or their husband, they're still thinking about that person that they were with, or they may be at the dinner table. You may be at the dinner table, and all of a sudden you wonder why Steve, a guy that you dated or that you had sex with, now you can't understand why you can't get him off of your mind. And these are real things that take place. So this is why I say these are the things why we must have real communication on the subject. So give me just a second, guys. I'm still trying to get. Mm. Okay. Well, I'm gonna move on. All right, guys. So, like I was saying, these are the things that we must have a real, transparent conversation on. So, um, and then allow understand that that person that has been through a tragic moment, right? Maybe they had went through molestation, or they went through being having at a place of they have been raped. You as a individual need to understand that there is going to be some healing if you are dating someone who has gone through that, that there is going to be a adjustment period that they are going to have to go through, and there are some real challenges that you're going to have to really be there for this person that you say you want them to be your wife. So have those conversations and be very transparent and understand why it's important to have those conversations, and then have real transparent moment in the sense of what you are open to and comfortable with in the bedroom. Don't wait until uh, after you get married, because you may be at a moment that you may be a person where you're okay at 3 or 4 times a week, and they may be okay with 1 or 2 times a week. So you can understand where there would be a conflict in that moment, and having that real transparency of having those conversations. All right. So the other one is I think it's important. I think it's important now uh, to also meet when you're dating someone, and I'm saying courtship because I really believe we should use the word courtship, because courtship, you're really in the intent of getting married to your husband and wife. Okay. But uh, if you are in that place, you need to meet the friends, right? Uh, there's a saying that it says that a birds of a feather, right, flock together, right? Or someone says a lot of times, if you grab someone's phone, right, and you really, or you go on someone's Facebook page, you can really tell a lot about a person, right? So there may be things that the reason why it's important to meet the friends, right, is because you're going to learn a lot about that individual through their friends, right? you're going to realize and identify things that you would not see on the basis of you just going on a date. Because when we go on dates, we act on our best behavior. We put on the facade, and some of us put on the mask, so we can cover those things, right? Um, and so sometimes when you go and have the ability to meet maybe the brothers or the sisters or the friends, they can help you identify things that you may not see, right? Uh, there may be things that you will realize that's not a that's not a part of the thing that I saw in him on our first or third date, right? Uh, it's like uh, if you take something as simple as are you a clean person, right? You don't know if that person is clean, picks up after themselves. You don't know those things until you go into their house, right? So there are some things that you are not going to see in a person until they're around their friends. And some of us we will date people and they will flip the script as soon as we are dating them with maybe their friends. Maybe they act a different way around their friends than they do just around you, right? So you need to identify, right, what behaviors they may be showing when they are with their friends. Maybe they don't swear and cuss up a storm with you on that first or third date. But as soon as they get around their friends, they might be a sailor, right? They might have a uncontrollable potty mouth, right? But you won't know that until you see that, right? And then you need to identify and say, hey, what are the things that I may be missing, right? And then you need to, after your first and third date, and jot some things down, right? I always tell everybody you should write how your date went, and keep a journal of it, and then it'll help you identify some things and go back and track some things that you may see that will help you and say, okay, uh, I notice when we go on a date, he always wants me to pay, right? Uh, for the meal, or vice versa, right? Or maybe they are a person that is conservative, very cheap, right? Now imagine going on a date, right? And this happens. There are real people in the world, real people that are, let's say, cheap, right? And you go on this date, and let's just say you guys go to the Olive Garden, or you guys go to your favorite restaurant, and you sit down, and he says, "Hey, uh, let's share a plate," right? And you're thinking, "Man, I'm gonna order. I'm hungry. I'm gonna order my own food." And he says, "No, let's just share one," right? So instead of you getting two plates, you guys share a plate, right? And let's just say on the third or fourth date, he does it again. And he's a person that is really conservative on spending money. Now you need to ask yourself, would I be comfortable being with someone who is this cheap, that is this conservative on their finances, right? There are people in real life that have a real uh, minded. So what I'm saying, this is why I'm saying that sometimes when we have the ability to uh, see things outside of just that date, maybe your friend, their friends, or the family, it can help you with the insight and say, man, I don't know if I want to be with somebody that is this cheap. And you got to be real with that. So now the next one what I want to talk about is to be yourself, right? What happens a lot of times is that we are not always ourselves on dates, right? We do our hair up good, we put on our best clothes, we go out and wash the car, we do the things that is going to impress, right? And because of the world that we live in, and this happens with males and females, right? You need to understand that sometimes when we go on dates with people, we sometimes want to portray something that we're not. And it's very important that we are ourselves. You do not want to be a counterfeit on a date. You want to be very transparent. If you are that person that works at 7-Eleven and you love your job, you need to be proud that you work at 7-Eleven. If you love that job and that is what makes you happy, or if you work at Walmart or wherever you work, and maybe you go on a date and she's maybe a accountant, or maybe she's a nurse, right? Or she does some type of profession. Maybe she's a realtor, right? Obviously, and especially for men, sometimes we like to put on a show that is not who we are because we don't want them to think less of us, males and females. We don't want them to think less of us because we live in a society that unfortunately there are women and men that have no interest in dating you unless you have six figures. If you cannot provide them the Louis Vuittons or the Michael Kors, there are women and men who will not have time for you. And you need to be okay and understanding that there has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them in the way that they perceive and they look at a relationship. Anyone who puts clothing, materials, or any other thing above someone else and saying that if I don't have these do not make, those material items do not make a person. A way that a person of their makeup, of how they look at life, their character, the morals, the values, how they serve people, right? But there are people who do not care about those things. That care about, are you able to give me down the road someday? Would you be able to give me my house, my car, my Michael Kors? And if you are with someone like that, understand they are not changing. They are not changing their lifestyle. You think they will change. They're going to be exactly where they're at, and they're going to stay exactly where they're at in spite of you wanting them to change. There are people that don't live in life and don't have any humility. They don't have any source of serving anybody else but themselves. So you need to understand, if you run across these individuals in your dating world, Don't take it personal that they don't value you as a person, and move on and be okay with it. Be okay that, hey, I may not have the ability to afford the Michael Kors and Louis Vuittons and et cetera, et cetera. And maybe not right now, right? So be aware of always be yourself. We have a real deal in life called self identity. And you know, self identity for a lot of people is a very tough thing to find their self worth, their self value. There are people that will spend years and not know their self identity, their self worth, their self value, because a lot of us base it off of our friendships, our families, and they make up our self worth. If I don't live to this standard, then I must not be worth much. These are real thoughts, real emotions that people have of themselves. And so I want to really emphasize and have you understand that, listen, you need, when you go into the dating game, you need to know your value. You need to know your self identity. You need to know the things that you are going to stand up for, the things that are important to you. Don't compromise. If you are a lion for Jesus and you are a warrior for the kingdom, don't compromise just because you want to be in a relationship. If you enjoy helping people, helping your neighbors, the community, whatever it might be, don't compromise just because you want to be in a relationship. Because down the road, you will never be happy. You will never be fulfilled compromising your self worth, your self value to try to impress somebody else. It's not worth it. So make sure that you understand the things that are important to you is a part of you being yourself, is a part of you recognizing that, listen, this is what is important to me in my life. Don't let anybody take that away from you. There are people in this life that will never see your value. They will never see your self worth. They may use you, but they may never recognize you anything more than what you are sitting right where you're at. So you need to be okay in knowing that, listen, I value myself. If nobody else values me except me, then I'm okay with that. We get into so much trouble by not uh, allowing our self identity to be at a place where we're so thrown off so much of the time because of what people think. Don't allow people to perceive you in something that they think you should be. There are a lot of people, and I use this for example, people that go to college and they may say, oh, you know what? They wake up one day and they say, you know what? This is crap. I don't want to be here. I'm not happy. I want to find something that in my life that's going to be something that can be different than what other people want me to do right now. And if school is something that isn't important to you, regardless if your family and everybody else is saying, "Oh, don't you leave, you stay in it." Listen, no one runs your life except for yourself. So find that thing that is going to make you happy, is going to help you be free of peace and having peace in your life. There's something very important about that. So when you don't allow if you don't allow yourself uh, to have those values and morals and standards, and you allow someone else to dictate that, it will take away your peace in your life. So don't be a person that allows someone else to govern who you are as a person. So all right, all right, all right. All right. So there are probably more red flags in dating than anything else. And now, a lot of us say red flags, right? Now, because I believe that all Christians have a degree of this thing called discernment, the Holy Spirit, right? We are able to tap into the Holy Spirit and the anointing with a lot, almost everything in our life. So, if you're in a place of courtship and you're wanting to marry this person, you need to understand that there are going to be some red flags that are going to come along. And if you asked everybody, and most people that go through crazy relationships, they'll say, "Man, I saw the red flag, right? If I only would have listened to the red flag, it would have saved me a lot of heartbreak. It would have saved me a lot of hurt. It would have saved me a lot of pain, right?" The discernment of the Holy Ghost is there for a reason. It's to be a protector because you belong to the kingdom. You belong to something bigger than just yourself. You belong in a place that has the will of you really pursuing everything and the promises that God offers in our lives. Now, the Lord wants us to have a relationship that is filled with promises and that is going to glorify His name, that's going to lift Him up. But He doesn't want us to be in relationships that are going to pull us away from Him. So sometimes relationships that don't work out is not a bad thing. It's a permissive thing that keeps us from sometimes disastrous or dangerous situations. So don't allow the red flags in your life. Don't let them just bypass, right? You need to really listen and see these things out of when you see them, don't ignore them, right? Get somebody out there that you can trust in and say, "Man, can I just run something across to you? This is what happened. This is what's taking place. Give me your food for thought. What do you think?" Because we can ignore red flags. It happens all the time. We can ignore red flags because we are so desperate to be in a relationship. Denial of something that takes place is a real deal. It happens all the time. We ignore things because maybe we've been in a relationship for 5 or 6 months, right? And we could not see ourselves being single again. We couldn't see ourselves having to take care of uh, our own responsibilities what it used to be too. There are a lot of people who stay in relationships that are dangerous ones. It takes away who they are as individuals. It takes away from their worth, their value, and the enemy tries to put us into a place of always coming back to a place of isolation, right? You can be in a relationship and at the same time be in a place of isolation. It happens, right? I know some of you guys, probably a lot of you guys have seen the movie Meet Joe Black. If you've never watched that movie, I'm just using this for example, right? Here's Joe Black. He's a successful lawyer. They moved to the city. The girl is so excited they're going to get a mansion on the hill, up on the high rise. I mean, the works. Something that she has never touched before. Something that she has never seen before in the financial matter, right? But here's Joe. Now, Joe's got to go to work, right? He's a lawyer. He works for a massive law firm, right? And now he's working in this law firm, and guess what takes place? He's got to be working 24/7, right? He's got to represent the law firm. He doesn't have time to spend with her. She's in this high rise all by herself, right? She doesn't fit in with the friends of the law firm. The wives are uppy up, the red bottom shoes. She just doesn't fit in. By the end of that movie, she is at a place. Hey Tammy, God bless you. It's good to see you. At the end of, and if you guys are watching this, please share is Karen. At the end of this movie, she ends up being in a psycho ward, right? She's an absolute nutcase by the end of the movie because she had never had the ability to what? Be at a place where she was able to identify red flags in this relationship. She was so excited about being in that relationship. She was excited about the grand high rise apartment, the red bottom shoes she'd never had, the best education for her kids, whatever, such etc. Money for a lot of people is a powerful thing that if they don't know how to have, it's like lottery winners, right? Nah, it's not a maybe. Most of them lose all their money because they've never had it. So they go and spend it. And then they're broke the next year. Millions. They had millions of dollars and now they're broke because they didn't know how to manage it. So these red flags can prevent us from having to be at a place of having disastrous consequences because we choose to ignore, we choose to have a lifestyle. In society, we look from the outside and we say, man, look at her. She's with the new guy and he's driving a BMW, and at the same time, she's broken inside. All her friends are no longer there because they can't relate to her. So understand how important this is that in the dating. Listen, you need to understand this, that if you see the red flags, if the Holy Spirit tells you, listen, there's something that doesn't feel right about this, there's something that doesn't look right about this, it's there so that it can prevent you from having a place in your life where you're going to look back and say, man, if I would have just listened. There are a lot of women who are in abusive relationships, and they could have told you, if I would have just listened to the red flags, if I would have just listened to the advice of those around me who cared for me, that wanted the best for me, it would have saved them some from physical or verbal abuse, and vice versa for men. There are men out there that are in relationships that are of verbal abuse, physical abuse. They are so consumed about being in a relationship, they'll stay in it even if it's not healthy. No relationship that is, let me put this, God does not put unhealthy relationships in your life. He doesn't do that. He gives us the free will, and he gives us the ability to ask for confirmation. Lord, what should I do? If we end up being in a bad relationship, it's not because God sent one us to a bad relationship to us. It's because we chose to ignore the red flags. It is very important, even as believers, even as Christians, we need to understand. Even if you may be 2 years and 3 years in dating, you're dating, and you're praying to God, and you're fasting every day, and you're saying, God, I just want to be married, I just want to be a wife. Listen, listen, listen. And sometimes God prevents you from being in a relationship right now because there are things that you still need to work on before you jump into being married or being a wife. It's very important and vice versa as for men. Some of you men out there think you are ready for a relationship, and if you had one, you would completely fall away from your faith. You would walk completely away from knowing the Lord, building your relationship with him. There are many of us that can say that we have been guilty of putting a relationship of the opposite sex before God. And some of us have done it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and this is a pattern. Some of us have a pattern of recycled men and recycled women. And we got to get to a place of understanding that is not God. God does not bring unhealthy relationships into our lives. We choose to bring unhealthy relationships in our lives. It's very important. So let me go back to, let me see. And let me say this real quick because I think it's very important for people to understand this. Sometimes we go to our friends and we say, well, no one's perfect, right? I mean, don't be so hard on them. I mean, nobody's perfect. But it doesn't mean that there's a difference between working on something, right? and choosing to be in something. You can have a bad mouth and be working on cleaning up your language, right? Maybe you live in a household where you spent all your life and all you've heard is profanity. That's all you've heard your whole life, right? So someone that comes along and says, I don't like or I dislike you using that language and allowing them to work on cleaning up their language, right? That's one thing. But if a person chooses to say, I don't care what you think, I don't see anything wrong with cussing like a sailor. You need to accept me as who I am, right? You don't need to change me. Now, these are real conversations, people. So you have to understand there are some things that people are not going to change. And if that is something as a believer or anybody in your life that you do not want to be around, you need to understand that that is something that is going to be there because they choose to continue to stay on that path, or they choose to work on it and change it. So you need to identify and say, is this something that is that this person is working on to change, or are they choosing to do this because they choose to stay in it? There's a choice. That's right. God bless you, Tammy. It's good to see you. There's a choice that we have to make. So make sure that you can identify the difference on the red flags. Now, this next one I was going to talk about. So now this is about courtship. Now, courtship, dating, right? And so and I'm saying this because, again, uh, one of the worst things you can do on a date or a courtshipping or however, whichever term that you use, I personally believe that you should be looking for a husband and a wife. So you should be in courtship. But one of the things that you have to realize that it's never a good idea is always talking about your ex marriage, your ex girlfriend, your ex relationships, and expecting that person that you're on a date with to be okay with you always talking about your ex, right? Now, if I was a person dating, that would be a sign that that person has not got over that ex. And it's very important that uh, they get to a place where they've gotten over him or her, right? It's not something that we just continue to say, well, he just, he just always talking about the ex and the wife. That should be a red flag to you. That should be a red flag saying there's something not right with Yahoo, and maybe this isn't a guy that I need to be with, right? Because sometimes here's the other thing: if the soul tie hasn't been broken, and I was talking about the imaginations in the bedroom, the spirit that happens when we don't break soul ties, and and uh, guess what's going to happen when you guys lay together in bed, or you guys get married and they haven't gotten over their ex or their girlfriend? They're going to be thinking about her when they're making love with you. Not maybe, they will. They will. So it's very important to understand, don't be talking about, hey, your exes and girlfriends. And if you haven't gotten over them, guess what? Don't jump into dating. Do not jump into dating if you have not got over it with them, because it's not going to be a good deal for you. So, uh, so here's one that's pretty. I guess probably a lot of people have a lot of conversation on, right? Uh, how do you feel about they paying for the first date, or they're paying for the first date? Who do you think should pay, right? And I want to so a couple things I want to jump into. Number one, that everything in what we do in the aspect of uh, in the dating arena is that I don't personally believe, now this is just me, that uh, there should be an equal in when it comes to who's paying for what on our first, second, third, fourth date, etc. Right? I don't believe. Oh, I just lost my. Hold on, guys. I just lost my light. Oh. All right, guys. Hopefully, you guys can see me now. Okay. So, back to who should pay 50-50 uh, in the aspect of dating. And I'm saying this because there are individuals that will not understand that there are people who will use you, and it doesn't matter if it's the short term or long term, they will use you for as long as they can. And in the aspect that uh, there are individuals, unfortunately, in the dating world that expect the man, or the man especially, to pay for everything, right? And I would say that most of the time, that everything should be all the well. Let me put it this way: it needs to be 50-50. A marriage is 50-50. If you start out in a dating and you are always paying everything, that is not 50-50. And you are showing them that it's okay for them to suck the life out of you, and you're okay with it. It shows them that, hey, you don't mind buying this and that and everything else. You don't mind if she orders $150 meal and she does it over and over and over and over again. I believe for men and women that they need to share in the aspect because a marriage is about 50-50. It's about coming together. It's about unison of one accord, right? And so when it comes to, guess what? When you get married and you have responsibilities of the house, you have responsibilities of bills, you have responsibilities to take care of. This again is always what? 50-50. It's divided, right? God didn't design a marriage to be one sided. So you shouldn't jump into dating one sided. You should jump into marriage and giving the significant person that you're dating the understanding that you are about togetherness. You are about working together. You are about making this unit be something that is going to be unified together, right? So when you always paying for the meals and you're always paying for this and always paying, I mean, there are people who are gold diggers. Now you got to watch out for the gold diggers out there. There's a lot of gold diggers, right? There are a lot of gold diggers out there that listen. Well, they have no problem taking your money. They have no problem you dating them for 5 or 6 months and they've collected 5 or 6 Michael Kors and red bottom shoes and they have no intention of being with you. None. Zip. Zero. You understand that there are people gullible, naive, that believe that that person loves them, wants to be with them, and they don't see it. They're blinded. They're blinded like no tomorrow, and then they don't realize down the road at 8 months, 9 months down the road when they leave, they're heartbroken. And they're not really their reality is not seeing the picture. Why? Just what we were talking about earlier. We choose to ignore the signs. We choose to ignore the real deal of understanding that this person doesn't want to be with you because they want to be a husband or a wife. They're with you because you have the ticket for them to be able to collect 5 or 6 or 7 purses or men. Now it happens for men. Now we always see it on TV as women doing it. But there are women out there, especially older women, I would say cougars, some of you guys call them cougars, that have no problem buying men everything under the sun. So you guys need to understand that these are real deals, real signs that you need to identify that no, dating is about 50-50. If you buy a meal and she buys the next meal, that's the way it should work. It should never be in a place, in my opinion, where that woman is always buying the meal or the man's always paying for the ticket because you're giving them mixed signals and the wrong signs as a male or female that you're okay of allowing them to take advantage of you. There are people out there that take advantage of your weakness, and you have to identify that. And that's a real deal. So you have to give 100%. Don't jump into relationships and dating and courtship. And I'm saying this because uh, a lot of you are still in the world, so you don't see courtship. But from the biblical perspective, courtship is the intent of having a husband and a wife. That should be your intent in dating, is that you're going to marry that person, not just shack up with them, not just live with them, but you have the intent of being married. And then I believe, and as we're dating, we need to be in a place of having communication, communicate, right? The most vital thing that all relationships must have is communication. They all must have good communication. I showed you guys a picture earlier. Let me bring that back up so you guys can have an understanding that this right here of we'll just call him Sam and Sarah. Sam here is on the phone. Not a very good deal to do on the first date, right? He's talking to his buddy about the golf game and the game last night and what they're going to do next week, or maybe he's on the conversation. You can see this girl here, she's just shattered and disastrous and upset. But real relationships, if you look out, go out to eat sometime, look around you, you will see this going on right now. This type of communication that is happening right now, they're absolutely miserable, right? Communication is the key. Here's another picture. Now here's one. She and them are, you can obviously see right now, right? A breakdown of communication will cause you to be uncertain about what took place, what happened, right? Let's say this girl here went out to Macy's and never told him that she was going to Macy's, and he's trying to figure out, well, why did you spend $500 on a purse, right? There's a breakdown in communication. But we start out like this. We start out happy. We're excited. Man, look at that guy. He's like, man, this is the girl who is for me. Excited. But then we end up being like this. So, guys, listen, don't break down in your communication in courtship. You need to have communication. How often do you date? What is how important is family values? How important is these things to you? And make sure that you have good communication. But guys, I'm gonna let you guys go till next week. Uh, these are just I could go into all of these subjects in a lot deeper way, but I'm just right now I'm just touching on the very surface here. But these are the things we need to understand. If you don't communicate, if you don't have the ability to have those conversations, then you'll be in a place and wondering why am I in a relationship after relationship after relationship? Because I have either bad communication skills, I choose to ignore the red signs, I choose not to value myself. Don't be a person that doesn't choose to have a value for yourself or others. God bless all you guys. Have a great week, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you for joining. Hopefully, you guys will join me. Tammy, God bless you. We'll see you guys, I guess, on Friday, and we will talk to you guys then.